Hello and welcome to Career Talk. We are live. I am Lee Hopwood. I am the CEO at the CCMA, and Career Talk is all about exploring the careers of people that are working in the contact center industry, and people that are sometimes they're really far in their career, sometimes they're early in their career. And I think the guest we have today is somewhere in the middle. So today we have got Lisa Range, who is Head of Telephony Sales Acquisition at Barclaycard. Good day, Lisa.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Now, we know that there might be some technical challenges, so we are going to hopefully everybody will bear with us and we shall crack on, fingers crossed. So, Lisa, you are Head of Telephony Sales Acquisition. What does that mean?
So I work for Barclaycard Payments, part of the Barclays Group, and our teams sell B2B, and it's payment facilities, and we work in the small business sector. So I look after the inbound sales team, the sales support team who help our customers as they're going through our onboarding and application journey, and also the sales performance optimization team. And that team looks after scheduling, capacity planning. We've got in there sort of data and MI analysis, along with lead management for our outbound dialers as well.
Interesting. And I don't often talk to people that work in a sales function. So I'm going to start there and find out a little bit more about what it's like working in a sales operation. What's it like?
It's fantastic. I've worked in sales all of my career. So I've been in contact centres for 22 years now, and started life on the phones, very proud to say. But I've always been in sales throughout. So I really enjoy the kind of the buzz of a sales culture. And if done well, it's a really kind of vibrant and energising environment to be in. I love kind of the target-driven environment and that friendly competition, and salespeople as well. They're a different breed, and I just enjoy spending my time with those types of people.
I love that, and I want to explore your 22-year career in contact centres. But just then, you talked about the sales environment being different, and if you do it well, what do you mean by that? If you do it well, what makes a lovely sales environment? Because you do hear of sales environments that are not so great for your mental health and well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. There are some organisations, I think, that get it wrong from a sales perspective, and I've seen sales change over the time I've been in the industry. So I think back in the day, or in some organisations, it's very much a kind of a product push. So what's right for the business, or what's right for the colleague in terms of their commission or sales incentive scheme. I think as the years have gone on, regulations change, but also the way we think about our customers. It's really different now, because we look at consultative sales, and it's all about, how do you really understand what the customer needs and present a solution to them that's going to support them, that they need, rather than something that you just want to push onto them. So I think if you get that right, then it can be a really motivating and engaging environment for colleagues to be in, because they're supporting customers in the right way rather than pushing a product.
And I think that's a really important distinction around how sales has changed. I remember when I was at university, I worked for a Windows company, and I did it for 2 weeks, and I really struggled. It was a sales environment. I was at the top of a set of stairs on a landing, frankly, above a shop on the high street, and I was given a chunk of the phone book and told to phone it and I had to, at the start of the 3 or 4 hour session, I had to say how many appointments I was going to get, and I was never allowed to say none. Because I just found it so hard because of the approach to selling. But that's changed.
Absolutely has. And there are still organisations that are cold calling. I'm sure they operate slightly differently to that now, but that's not the kind of environment. I mean, that's not the kind of environment I work in. Cold calling was never for me, to be honest. So you know, I've always worked in kind of warm sales environments. So the customer has expressed an interest in the product. So for me, I lead inbound and in my team, and the customers there are asking, you know, they're interested in your product. They're making that approach. Our outbound sales team works in a very similar way. It is customers who have expressed an interest via our website, etc. So I think from a sales perspective, that makes it an easier, not an easier sell, but also an easier conversation with the customer, because that interest is already there.
Yeah, it's a welcoming conversation. And I wanted to explore this a little bit more with you on Career Talk, because there will be people that are listening that maybe have a different, or maybe it's not an up-to-date view of sales. You know, I have my experience that I drew on. I know that's not the case these days, but just to see how things are different. So if anybody's thinking about getting into a sales environment, actually they are lovely places to be. And you've built your career in it.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Start on the phones. And when I started it, I was selling PPI. So we all know where that kind of ended up. Thankfully, I mean, we weren't involved in any of that kind of mis-selling, the scandal. But, you know, I think that's a prime example of sales done wrong, if you like.
Yeah. So tell us, where did you start? So you just said then you started on the phone selling PPI 22 years ago.
Yeah.
Tell us about that experience. What was it like being in that environment then?
Yeah, I mean, that's not where I intended my career to go. So I trained to be a professional dancer, actually. And then in the final year of my training, I injured my back. So I took a job in a call centre as a stopgap while I reassessed where I was going to take my life and my career. Like many people, didn't expect it to last, and here we are. So started at Capital One, which was a really lovely place to work. Actually, Capital One in Nottingham. Capital One had just kind of moved from they'd expanded from America into the UK, and when I joined that business, they were yet to make a profit. So it was a really interesting time to be part of that business. I was there for a few years actually, and kind of moved into leadership positions there, and kind of continued my career in leadership, in sales leadership from Capital One.
Interesting. And so being in that environment, what was it that you liked about that environment? And because I'm guessing that there were things that you probably learnt there that you've probably taken into your own leadership style. Yeah,
absolutely. I really enjoyed the structure of a large corporate organization, and I've learnt that throughout my career, and I've actually gone back to that in Barclays and Barclaycard. I enjoy the just that kind of environment, in terms of there is a performance management framework, you know, that cycle of appraisal, etc. I've been in other organisations that don't operate in the same way. So yeah, and also the financial industry. I've kind of gone back to that a couple of times in my career. I just enjoy that environment.
Interesting. So tell us a little bit more about where you were before you left Capital One, and that and that role that you had then.
Yeah, so I actually applied to be a sales coach. That was the first role I applied for, but I'd already been kind of looking after a team. I'd been kind of seconded in, and the sales coach was the next natural progression. But actually I did pretty well in the interview, and they decided not to give me the sales coach role and promote me one above, which was the first time I think that had ever happened in that company. So I went straight into a team leader role, and I was running a team there that kind of tested new products and new processes with customers. So that was a really interesting role to be in. I left Capital One and moved to an outsource agency. I'd done sort of a few years there and felt like it was time for a change. So moved on to an outsourced role in the utility sector. Didn't particularly enjoy that. It was a very different environment. The whole kind of working for a partner, if you like. I didn't enjoy that environment as much. I prefer to kind of be involved in the organisation, selling that organisation's product, if you like.
And it is different, isn't it? It's one of the things that I do talk to our outsourcing members about. Is it's hard for people working on the front line, team leaders, because they've got to embrace the brand, the client's brand, and at the same time, absolutely embrace the outsourcer's brand. And so it's not necessarily that there's a conflict, but you're working for two organizations, and it's harder.
It is, and I don't think there was a particularly great relationship at a more senior level between the partner and the organisation I was working for, which probably didn't help the situation.
Yeah, I think it shows how important that partnership approach is. But so you were there for a short period of time working in utilities. So you've been in finance, into utilities, and then where did you go next? Because I've got a funny feeling you came back to finance.
I did indeed, yes. I took a role with Alliance and Leicester, as it was then, Santander now, and really loved that. So back into a big organisation with that corporate feel about it, back into finance, and I thoroughly enjoyed that role. But I was looking, sort of after a couple of years there, I was looking for the next move in my career. And actually in the part of the business that I was in, I felt like I'd hit a bit of a ceiling there and I couldn't see my next move. So I then I jumped ship again and moved to a very different industry and went into construction. So I went to work for a company called Lafarge and set up a small business team there, small business function. And I mean, that role in itself was a really interesting role because it was building something from scratch, which I thoroughly enjoyed. The organisation and the culture in that organisation, I did not enjoy. It was quite aggressive. People, you would shout and swear in meetings, which I just was not used to and did not enjoy. And then there was the huge economic crash. The construction industry took a massive hit and they asked for voluntary redundancy. And I put my hand straight up and was keen to get out and move on. And it was actually the best decision I could have made. It was from that organisation that I then started to look again to go, right, I know now what I want. I want a financial role in a large corporate and started to look for that. And then saw the role in Barclaycard. But it was a big step actually to move to Barclaycard because I took a step down. So I was kind of leading leaders, if you like, and building something in Lafarge. I then went back to being a team leader in order to get into the organisation, which I knew I would be able to build a career in, or I hoped I would. So that was a big decision to make, to take a financial hit, if you like, and to start to travel. I mean, Lafarge was 20 minutes up the road. I live in Nottingham and Barclaycard is in Northampton. It's 70 miles away. So not only have I taken a pay cut, I'm now paying more money in terms of petrol to go to my place of work. But 12 years later, I continue to make that journey. Not as often, I have to say, thanks to hybrid working. But yeah, I mean, it's the best move I could have made.
And there's a few things there that I want to ask you a little bit more about. Let's start with that redundancy. There'll be many people in this sector that go through redundancies. We know it happens more often than we'd like it to. How did you feel when you went through that? And I know you said that you took voluntary redundancy. It actually probably wasn't too big a decision for you, but you're still going to go through emotions.
Absolutely. It's still a really difficult time because, I mean, you don't know where you're going next. I've not been with that business a very long time, so the redundancy package was minimal, if I'm honest. So there is that financial worry. There's also, am I going to find another job? Am I going to get a job in time doing something that I want to do? It's a difficult time. And then you also worry about how that will reflect on your CV. Will people look at that and go, made redundant? Why was that? But I think the world has moved on, and I think particularly through the pandemic, redundancies were rife, weren't they? Unfortunately, and quite often in our industry, and I don't think people look at that as a negative. Well, they certainly didn't. It's never come up in any kind of interviews I've had since. And as I say, it was the best thing that could have happened to me at that time. I wasn't happy in the role. I found a role that I've absolutely loved and have built a really successful career in.
and I am going to come back and continue to ask you about that. But there was something else you said a little bit earlier, that you had hit a ceiling in, I think it was at your time at Alliance and Leicester, you'd hit the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit more about that, because sometimes that ceiling absolutely exists. Sometimes there's lots of reasons why a ceiling exists. It could be just simply there is no movement. We know today people are looking for a career path, and we know that those careers are in the contact center space. You can go anywhere once you hit working in the contact center. The opportunities within and beyond are massive. But you hit that ceiling. What was it what was that ceiling for you, and how did you realize that you'd hit that ceiling?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of logistical for me, because at that time I didn't drive. So I was traveling to an office that was in the city centre in Leicester by train. And the people above me, it was quite a small part of the organisation, the people above me weren't going anywhere. And there would have been opportunities had I been able to drive, because the head office, if you like, was on a retail park on the outskirts of Leicester. I simply couldn't get there. So I knew, with my current circumstances, I just couldn't move any further within that business. It made me realise I absolutely needed to learn to drive, which I did. I left that company and learned to drive. I went through an intensive crash course, and thank goodness I did, because there's no way I'd have been able to travel 70 miles up the M1 to get to Barclaycard if I hadn't done that. But yeah, it was purely logistical. But I think that's a challenge, isn't it, at many stages in your career. And there's been points when I've felt like that actually in Barclaycard, and particularly because I've had a young family, and you think, oh, have I gone as far as I can go now? But again, I think the world changed during the pandemic, and it's opened up other opportunities, or it's opened people's eyes to a different way of working, which I think has removed that ceiling in a lot of areas.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, and it's really interesting that it was a logistics challenge that created that ceiling. I would love to think that just wouldn't be the case now. But you then were back in finance, and you're at Barclaycard. So and you'd gone back a step. And I completely get that. And there will be people that are looking at, right, where do I want to go? This is what my big picture is. This is where I want to end up, or in that ballpark I want to be a director of. I want to be whatever it is that they want to be. And they're going, but I've got to go sideways first. I've done some of these interviews where people have been across so many different roles in the contact center, and that's just given them that breadth and depth that in the service side, that's enabled them to progress their career. But go on, tell us about what it was like going back to a team leader role and where your career went from there.
Yeah, I mean, I loved it, to be honest. I loved getting, back into, okay, tell me about what's going on. Tell me about what's good, what's bad, and let me help you put it right. Let me help fix it. I really loved getting back to kind of frontline management. And I was confident taking that step back, because I felt, I had faith in my ability actually at that stage that I would be able to prove myself quite quickly as a team leader to enable me to move on. And I did, I spent probably about a year, did really well, and the team performed really well. It was a great culture, and sort of end of the year got great appraisals. So that stood me in good stead when an opportunity came up. There was an opportunity to move into a sales delivery manager role, which meant kind of floor management, team leaders reporting into you, which I applied for and got. So that was quite quick progression. So I felt really proud, because I was kind of back where I had been, leading leaders. Salary was pretty much back on a par. So it had taken a bit of a year, and I'd had to tighten. We had to tighten the purse strings and just be a bit more careful. But quickly got back there. So I'd say to anybody thinking about it, if you can financially, and if you think it's the right move, then don't be scared to take that step back, because the experience that you've got will help you move forward. I suppose the next break, if you like, in my career came quite quickly, because because my leader at the time, she was the head of the telephony team. She left 8 months after I'd been promoted, and I knew I could do that job. And somebody gave me a piece of advice once around the best piece of advice I think I've had in my career is, if you think you're ready for the next step or the next role, you've left it too long. So from a Barclays perspective, I knew the business might not think I was ready for the next step because I'd only been promoted 8 months previous. And it's recommended that you enroll for 12 months before you apply for anything else. But I just had the belief that I could do it, and I knew I had to just bite the bullet, face the fear, and speak to the recruiting manager. And I went and had a word with him, and I said, I want this job. I want this job. It was the most nerve-wracking, terrifying conversation I think I've had in my career. I said, I want this job. And it was October, and I said, please, can you hold off recruiting for the role? Can you second me in and give me a shot? Give me 3 months to show you what I can do. And if it doesn't work out, you can recruit in January. And he thought about it, mulled it over for a day or two, and which was an awful time while I waited for his decision. Then he came back and he went, yeah, I'll give you a shot. So he did. So I had 3 months. So I worked super hard and did everything I could to sort of put myself in the frame. It came to January. He said I'd done a great job, but he had to go through a process, and he put the job out on the internal job board. He sent it out externally as well and invited applicants. And I, of course, applied. I prepped for the interview, and thankfully I got the job. So yeah, really, a really proud moment for me, and kind of that was just, I suppose, an example of where sometimes you've just got to just go for it. Don't let the opportunity pass you by.
And what a lovely story, and going for it, your dedication, your commitment, your drive to go and put yourself forward and have that first conversation, then 3 months of proving it, which I have no doubt either, and in you, and then in January having to go through that recruitment process. And I'm sure your heart sank when they said, we've got to go through a process anyway. But to go through that, and there was something that you said there around the job interview. You prepped and prepped and prepped for that job interview, and it's so. And I know that we talk at the moment around there being more jobs than there are people, but do you know what? You've still got to be the right person for the job. Certainly when you're looking at the head of level, which this one was, it's you've still got to go and prep and prep and prep. What did you do? Can you remember what you did in preparing for that job?
Yeah, I mean, I knew it was going to be a competency-based interview. So I made sure that I probably had about 10 examples of, things that I'd done whilst kind of getting myself ready, if you like, and doing the role. And I learnt these examples inside out so that I knew whatever question he threw at me, I'd have an example that I could use to fit the question. So I'd say, always make sure you've got your examples and you're really clear on the examples so that you've got lots to pull on. I also spoke to lots of stakeholders around the business, asked their views, because I knew the leader and the recruiting manager was going to ask, where do I want to take the business? So, I got I canvassed lots of opinion from lots of other people around the business to see where they thought we could make improvements, to help me form my own opinions and kind of discussion points around where I wanted to take the team. And then I went in with a really clear plan. So as well as prepping for the interview, I also presented him with a plan. Here's what I want to do. Here's how I see not just the next, I know a lot of people ask for 30, 60, 90-day plans. I had that, but I said, here's where I would like to take the team in the next 18 to 24 months. So I'd thought kind of further ahead, which I think he appreciated.
Absolutely. And during that time, so you've progressed into the role, and I guess you've continued to grow within Barclaycard. Have you had support? learning and development support along the way, or have you been learning, listening to customers, listening to what's going on, and on the job training, I think they call that, on the job learning, but have you had formal support during your career?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what formal support have you had?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to attend a course with the Ashridge Business School, which was like a residential leadership course really early on in my career, which really helped. There's also been lots of kind of, short training interventions along the way around leadership. It's a fantastic organisation in that no matter what you want to develop in, they will find a way to help you do that. So, I'm really interested in public speaking, and I went to our learning team and said, do we have any courses? And they went away and they found, and I'm now enrolled on a virtual course around public speaking with the Washington University. So I think you've got to take some ownership for your own development as well. And there are resources out there, and especially now in the age of the internet, you can find anything you want online. And if you really want to develop, you absolutely can do that. You just got to take some ownership and push yourself forward.
I love that. We'll have you speaking on our platform at an event anytime soon, I'm sure. That's really good. And actually, because I think you also have had a role at Barclaycard around improvement.
Yeah, that's right. So I have 2 children, and they are now 7 and 8. So I had my children very close together. And when I returned from my second period of maternity leave, I knew there was no way I was going to be able to travel to Northampton 5 days a week. So I took a slightly different role, still in and around the same team, but moved into a role around performance and improvement. And within that, I headed up kind of our QA function, the complaints team, the data and analysis, and the MI that supported the contact center leadership team at that time, and also looked at training. We had a gap around induction, so I worked with some learning and development professionals to develop a really comprehensive learning and induction program that actually we still use parts of now, and that was some years ago now, but was kind of rolled out across our business as being sort of best in class and held up as a really good example of how you can induct people into the business.
Interesting. So that continuous improvement and learning and clearly driving for the next thing is clearly in your blood. And you were. It's really interesting that you took a different role so that you didn't have to do the commute so much because you had younger children then. And some people in the past may well have approached that as my career stalled, it went somewhere else. But I suspect that gave you even more experience and a broader bed in order to grow and develop in the role that you have now. Are you still there, Lisa? I think I might have just lost Lisa.
I'm really
Are you still
sorry,
with us?
Lee. I lost you there. I think you were talking about juggling a career and children. Is that right?
That's okay. I'm going to ask you. I was talking about how the experience.
I am still with you.
We've done well. The technology has held up.
We have. Yes, we have. 29 minutes. Sorry, I missed that last question. You turned into a robot, so apologies.
That's okay. No, thank you. And so I was talking about how when you went into a different role because of having young children, I know there's lots in between there. Some people would say that their careers stalled, they stepped back, things were not necessarily seen as positive, but it feels like actually that gave you much more breadth in your experiences that enabled you to move into the role that you're in now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really useful opportunity to just develop some different skills, whilst managing 2 babies, you know, juggling the stresses and strains of, you know, 2 young ones and a full-time job. So just being able to work remotely at that point really helped. But yeah, absolutely, getting the experience in different areas has definitely helped me in my career. To the point that you made around career stalling, I think mine did. But I think I made a conscious decision around that. You know, it was about making sure I was there to support the children. So by taking that kind of sidestep, if you like, enabled me to do that and make sure I was there for drop-offs and pickups and important nativity plays and all of that great stuff. But the children are now 7 and 8. I did move back into operational leadership probably 3 years ago now, and actually opted to take a slightly smaller role probably about 18 months ago to enable me to get involved in some things that I'm really passionate about that will have a big impact on the wider team. So, you know, I'm now involved in like a Women in Sales initiative. I'm involved in colleague engagement across our part of the business. I kind of drive that with one of my colleagues. And I'm also getting involved in conversations around the environment and sustainability. So yes, whilst my career definitely did stall for a period, I now feel like it's time to kind of look at all of those things that I'm passionate about and use my skills and experience to have that wider impact using everything that I've learned throughout my career to date.
And inspiring others, absolutely. And so what do you think the future looks like for you?
Who knows? I mean, I don't think I will ever leave contact centres. I really, really enjoy the environment. I have considered over the last year or two whether I should leave the organisation, and have definitely looked around, but made the decision that I want to stay where I am. I mean, that I'm lucky to work for a global organisation, and there are so many opportunities within our business for the people that want them. So I'm not entirely sure where. I'm not desperate for a move up, if you like, but I am really keen to develop in these areas that I mentioned that I'm really passionate about. So, you know, developing others, empowering women in sales, which can be a real male-dominated environment, all of that kind of stuff I see myself moving more into in the future.
Interesting. And you're with an organisation that's looking after you as well and giving you those career opportunities as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, do you know what, Lisa? This has been fantastic. I've got 3 really quick questions for you.
Okay.
Coffee or tea?
Tea. I hate coffee.
How do you take your tea?
Really weak. Really weak with milk and sugar.
Something to discover. Dogs or cats?
Oh, I've got cats, but would love a dog. I never got a dog because I was always in the office. So we got cats, but we would love a dog.
How many cats have you got? How many cats have you got?
3. Long story.
We'll do another career talk on looking after cats and working.
3. That's a long story.
And one last question for you. A night in or a night out?
Oh, night out. I trained to be a dancer, love a boogie, don't get out very often with young kids, so definitely a night out.
Out. And I have to say, you've been a great pleasure interviewing you today. And it's always fun. I always enjoy our conversations. Thank you so much, Lisa, for joining me today on Career Talk. I really appreciate it.
Thanks
Have
for
a
having
fantastic.
me. See you soon.
Take care. See you soon.